At every family dinner, Renee laughed and told the room my baby wasn't my husband's. A joke, she called it. Everyone chuckled. But jokes get repeated and repetition becomes record. She never imagined I kept the receipts. Before we get back to today's story, I have some exciting news to share. We have officially launched a brand new channel called Tales Beneath Skin. Over there, we are dedicating our platform to bringing you the juiciest, most jaw-dropping Reddit drama stories on the internet. We're diving deep into wild family feuds, shocking relationship betrayals, and epic tales of petty revenge. But we don't just leave you hanging with a cliffhanger. We track down every single update, plot twist, and final resolution so you get the complete, satisfying story from start to finish. Grab your popcorn because we are serving all the tea with full context, community reactions, and top-tier narration that brings the chaos to life. Make sure to subscribe to Tales Beneath Skin right now so you don't miss out. You'll find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag. Thank you for your continued support as we grow this community. Now, back to the story. I wasn't supposed to hear it. That's the thing about my sister Renee, she performs. She has always performed. Whether there's an audience or not, she's rehearsing for one, and if you catch her in the wings, before the curtain, you see something she never means to show you. It was a Sunday in October, at Grandma Esther's house, the one with the low ceilings and the wallpaper that has been peeling in the same corner since I was 9. I had gone upstairs to change Theo. He was 6 months old then, warm and heavy against my shoulder, smelling of milk and that particular sweetness babies have that no one has ever managed to bottle. I laid him on the bed in the spare room, the one that used to be my mother's, and I was folding the little terracloth changing pad when I heard voices coming up through the vent. Old houses do that. Sound travels through them like water finding the lowest point. The kitchen sits directly below the spare room, and the heating vent in the floor is a kind of accidental telephone. As kids, Renee and I used to lie on our stomachs and listen to the adults argue about money and whose turn it was to host Christmas. So I knew the voices instantly. Renee and our cousin Marissa. You have to time it right, Renee was saying. Her voice had that bright, conspiratorial lift it gets when she thinks she's being clever. You wait until Grandma's had her one glass of sherry when she's soft, and then you just drop it. Light, like it's nothing. Marissa laughed, a little uncertain. Drop what? The Theo thing, the are we sure he's Daniel's thing. I heard the clink of a glass being set down. You should see Grandma's face every time. She doesn't laugh, she files it. That's the whole point. I stopped folding. I want to be precise about this because for months afterward I doubted my own memory. I want to be precise. She did not say joke, she did not say tease. She said the whole point. Renee, Marissa said, and there was a wobble in it, the sound of someone realizing the water is deeper than they thought. That's kind of mean though. Right, like it's Nadia. It's strategy, Renee said. You don't understand how Grandma thinks. She's got that whole, you know, the house, the accounts, whatever's in that will, and she's old-fashioned. She wants everything to go to the stable one, the responsible one. So if there's a little question mark over Nadia's marriage, over whether she's even whatever. A pause, the refrigerator hummed. I'm not saying anything that isn't already funny. Everybody laughs, I'm just the one saying it out loud. Downstairs, someone turned on the tap. The conversation dissolved into the ordinary clatter of a kitchen. But I stayed where I was, one hand flat on the changing pad, my heart doing something slow and enormous in my chest. Behind me, Theo made a small sound in his sleep, a coo, a syllable of a language he hadn't invented yet. I had spent 6 months believing my sister was thoughtless, cruel by accident, the kind of person who says the wrong thing because she can't feel the room. I had defended her to Daniel a dozen times. She doesn't mean it. That's just Renee. She's always needed to be the center. Standing in my dead mother's old bedroom, listening to my son breathe, I understood that I had been wrong in the gentlest possible way, and the truth was not gentle at all. She meant every word. She had always meant it. The laughing was just the wrapping paper. I picked up my son. I went downstairs. I smiled at everyone, and I said the roast smelled wonderful, and I did not let my face do a single thing it wanted to do. Some people find out the worst thing about their family in a shout. I found out mine through a heating vent, in a whisper, and the whisper was worse than any shout could ever have been. I didn't sleep that night. Daniel slept the way he always does, flat on his back with one arm flung over his eyes like a man who has nothing to answer for, because he doesn't. I lay next to him replaying the vent, the sherry, she files it, and I felt the old thing rising in me, the thing I'd been managing since Theo was born, the postpartum fog that had in the early weeks made ordinary sadness feel like drowning. I had climbed out of that. I had done the work, the doctor, the little white pills, the walks around the block at 6 a.m. when Theo wouldn't settle. I was not going back into the water because of my sister. So instead of drowning, I did the thing I do. The thing I do for a living. I make records. I've worked as a paralegal in family and estate law for 11 years, and 2 years ago I got certified as a document examiner. My whole professional existence is built on a single unglamorous truth that most people never think about until it's too late. Intention evaporates, but records remain. People say things they'll swear later they never said. People sign things they'll claim they never understood. And somewhere in a file, in an email chain, in a dated note, the truth sits patiently, waiting to be produced. I have watched a woman lose a house because of a text message she sent in anger and forgot about. I have watched a man win back custody because of a calendar he kept without ever thinking it would matter. I know what a record is worth. The next family gathering was 2 weeks later, Aunt Belle's birthday. I brought a store cake and a bright dress, and I watched Renee work the room like the professional she was. She waited, exactly as she'd told Marissa. She waited until the plates were cleared and Grandma Esther had her one glass of sherry glowing amber in her hand, and then Renee turned to me across the table with a face full of warmth and said, "You know, I keep telling people I still can't get over how little Theo looks like Daniel. I mean, come on, Nadia. Is there something you want to tell us?" And she laughed, and she looked around the table, gathering the laughter the way you'd gather chips off a poker table. And they laughed. Aunt Belle didn't, but the others did, that soft, nervous laughter people give when they don't want to be the one who ruins the mood. I watched Grandma Esther. Renee was right. Grandma didn't laugh. Her eyes went to me and then to Theo asleep in his carrier, and something in her face closed like a ledger. She files it. Daniel's jaw tightened. He's a music teacher. He lives in a world of gentle teenagers and half-learned scales, and cruelty genuinely bewilders him. He opened his mouth and I put my hand on his knee under the table, and he closed it. "That's a good one, Renee," I said, and I smiled, and I meant nothing by the smile at all. Later in the car, Daniel gripped the wheel. "Why do you let her? Every time. She says the exact same thing every time and you just—" "I'm not letting her," I said. I was looking out the window at the dark suburban streets sliding by. "I'm collecting her." He glanced at me. "What does that mean?" I didn't answer right away, because what I was thinking about, strangely, was a cassette tape. When I was small, Grandma Esther made a cassette of lullabies, her own voice, thin and off-key, singing the songs her mother had sung, Hush Little Baby, and one in a language I never learned. She recorded it for me and Renee, and it lived in a shoebox for 30 years, and last Christmas she'd pressed it into my hands and said, "For the baby. Someday." I'd played it once. Grandma's young voice, 40 years gone, coming out of the little speaker as clear as the day she'd sung it. She hadn't meant to preserve herself. She'd meant to sing a baby to sleep on an ordinary evening, but the tape didn't care what she meant. It just kept it all, the singing, the creak of her chair, the moment near the end where she laughed at herself for missing a note. Some things get recorded whether you mean them to or not, I thought, watching the streetlights. And they don't care what you meant. "It means," I said finally to Daniel, "that Renee thinks she's telling a joke, but a thing repeated enough stops being a joke and starts being a claim. And claims can be answered." He didn't understand yet. That was all right. I was only beginning to understand it myself. To understand why it hurt the way it did, you have to understand what I'd been to Renee and what she'd been to me. Our mother died when I was 20 and Renee was 24. Cancer, the fast kind, 4 months from the diagnosis to the funeral. Our father had left long before and stayed gone. So it was the two of us and Grandma Esther and a house full of a dead woman's things. I was the one who sorted the things. I was the one who sat on the floor of our mother's closet for 3 days folding her cardigans into boxes while Renee couldn't handle it and went to stay with a friend. I was 20, and I learned to handle it because someone had to, and I have been the one who handles it ever since. When Renee's first marriage collapsed, I was the one who drove 4 hours with a trunk full of empty boxes. When she was between jobs, she has been between jobs a great deal. I was the one who quietly covered her share of Grandma's roof repair so no one would know she couldn't. When she forgot Grandma's 80th birthday, I signed the card from both of us. I did these things gladly. I want that to be clear. I loved my sister with the particular ferocity of a younger sibling who spent her childhood trailing after the older one, wanting to be let in. I was proud to be the one who handled things. It felt like being needed, and being needed felt like being loved. I never once thought about what I was building. Because here is the ugly arithmetic Renee had understood before I did. Every time I quietly handled something, I was also building a picture. A picture of 2 granddaughters, one steady and one struggling, and in that picture, Grandma Esther's affection and, eventually, Grandma Esther's estate would flow toward the steady one. That's what the joke was for. I see it now the way you see the shape of a room when the light finally comes on. Renee had watched me become the responsible one, and she'd realized she couldn't outsteady me, so instead she would out-narrative me. She couldn't make herself look more stable, but she could make me look less. A question mark over my marriage, a giggle about my baby's paternity. A soft, deniable, endlessly repeatable little poison dropped after the sherry when Grandma was tender and suggestible. And she wasn't even hiding it well. That was the thing that started to gnaw at me after the birthday dinner. Twice now, Renee had said things she shouldn't have known. The first was at the birthday itself. As we were leaving, she'd hugged me, she always hugs me, that's part of the performance, and murmured, "You should really update your paperwork, by the way. Now that Theo's here, you never know." I'd laughed it off, but paperwork. Renee had never once in her life used that word to me. Renee didn't know I'd been named in anything, unless she'd seen something. The second was a phone call a few days later, ostensibly about nothing. Grandma's arthritis. The weather. And then, casually, Grandma showed me the new binder she's putting together, all her important documents in one place. Isn't that organized of her? A pause. She had me help her sort it. I set the phone down very carefully after that call, the way you set down something you've just realized is fragile. Because I know what a binder of important documents is. I make my living in the presence of them. And I understood, with a cold clarity that felt almost like relief, that this had never really been about a joke at a dinner table. Renee wasn't laughing. Renee was sorting. And she had made one mistake that she didn't know was a mistake, the same mistake everyone in my line of work eventually watches someone make. She had assumed that because I was the one who quietly handled things, I wasn't paying attention. There's a moment in my work I've come to recognize. The moment a client stops being a victim and becomes a party to the matter. You can see it happen. Their shoulders drop, their voice steadies, and they start asking the right questions instead of the sad ones. They stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What do I actually have?" I had that moment at my own kitchen table at 11 o'clock at night, with a cold cup of tea and a legal pad, while Theo slept and Daniel graded papers in the next room. What do I actually have? I started listing it. And the more I listed, the more I understood how badly Renee had underestimated the woman she'd been treating as furniture for 6 months. The first thing I had was the vent. Not a recording of it, I hadn't thought to record it, I'd been too stunned, but I had the memory, dated, and more importantly I had Marissa, who had been there, and who had told Renee to her face that it was mean. Marissa had a conscience. A wobbly one, but a conscience. The second thing I had was pattern. Renee thought each joke was a fresh little grenade tossed and forgot. But I am, by training and by temperament, a keeper of records. And I keep a family group chat, the one Renee herself created 3 years ago, the one she posts in constantly, because Renee cannot resist an audience even in text form. I opened it that night and scrolled back, and there it was. Not once. Not twice. 9 times over 5 months in writing, time-stamped, Renee had made the joke in the chat where she couldn't rely on tone to save her. Lol, does baby Theo have Daniel's ears though? Just saying, math is math face with tears of joy, asking for a friend named Grandma. 9 times. In her own hand, on her own platform, delivered to an audience of 11 relatives. I am a certified document examiner. Do you know what 9 dated, self-authored, publicly delivered statements imputing infidelity and questioning a child's paternity are, when a woman's marriage and her standing in a family estate are demonstrably being harmed by them? They're not a joke. They're a paper trail. She had built it herself and handed me the binder. The third thing I had, and this was the one that made me set down my pen and press my hands flat against the table to steady them, was the estate itself. Because I don't guess about these things. I don't fume in the dark about what might be in a will. I know how to find out what a person is entitled to know through the front door, legitimately. The next morning, I called Grandma Esther and asked if I could come by, just me and Theo, for tea. She said yes in a voice that was warmer than I'd feared and cooler than it used to be, and I understood that Renee's poison had done real work. That cooling was measurable. That cooling had a source. I did not go to Grandma's to plead my case. That's what Renee expected me to do, to come crying to protest, to look exactly as unstable as the story required. Instead, I brought Theo, and I let him do what 6-month-olds do, which is to be undeniably, gurglingly, obviously himself, and I brought the cassette. Grandma, I said, when Theo was dozing in her lap and her old hands were resting on him, I found your lullaby tape. The one you made for me and Renee. I want Theo to have it. I want him to hear your voice. Her eyes filled. She held that baby a little tighter. I didn't say anything about Renee, not one word. I had learned, watching her, that the loudest move is not always the strongest one. I just let a real thing sit in the room next to all the false ones, and I trusted the difference to register. On my way out, Grandma stopped me at the door. "Nadia," she said, "that binder, the one your sister's been so keen to help me organize." A pause, her old eyes sharp under the soft. "You're the one who knows about all that legal business, aren't you? Maybe you should have a look at it sometime. Make sure I've done it right." I kept my face very still. I'd be glad to, Grandma. Some things get recorded whether you mean them to or not. Renee had been recording herself for 5 months. And Grandma, it turned out, had been quietly keeping her own record of who showed up with a baby and a lullaby, and who showed up with a knife wrapped in a giggle. I gave it a week. Timing, as my sister would say, is everything. Then I invited Renee to lunch. Just us. She loved that. She read it as a summons to be adored, the younger sister coming to the older one for guidance, the natural order restored. We met at a bright cafe with good light, which I chose on purpose, because I wanted to see her face clearly and I wanted her to feel watched. She ordered a salad she didn't eat and talked for 20 minutes about her new boyfriend and a job that was about to come through. And I let her, the way you let a wave roll in before it turns. Then, during a lull, I took out my phone and slid it across the table. On the screen was the group chat, scrolled to one of the 9. Just saying, math is math face with tears of joy. Renee glanced at it and laughed. "Oh my God, are you still on about the jokes? Nadia, come on, lighten up. You've been so serious since the baby." "How many times would you guess?" I said pleasantly. "Have you made that particular joke? Round number." "I don't know, it's just a bit." 9, I said. "In the chat, that we can count. In writing, dated, delivered to 11 people, several of whom are elderly and impressionable." I let that sit. That's just the written ones, that doesn't count the vent. Something flickered. The what? The heating vent in Grandma's spare room. It carries sound down to the kitchen, or up from it. You used to know that. We used to lie on the floor and eavesdrop on Mom. I watched it land. "You explained your whole strategy to Marissa through that vent, Renee. She doesn't laugh, she files it. That's the whole point. Those were your words. I was upstairs changing Theo." I heard all of it. The color didn't leave her face all at once. It went in stages, like a tide pulling back, cheeks first, then her lips, then a gray settling around the eyes. And then, because Renee is Renee, she reached for the tools that had always worked. She reached for tears. You spied on me. Nadia, do you hear yourself? You're eavesdropping through vents, you're screenshotting a family chat you're keeping, what files, on your own sister. Do you understand how that sounds? This is exactly what I've been worried about. Ever since Theo, you haven't been right. Everyone can see it, and now you're. There it is, I said quietly. She stopped. That's the story, isn't it? That I'm not right, that I'm unstable. The vent, the screenshots, the files, you're already rehearsing how to make me the crazy one for noticing. That's the same move as the joke, Renee. It's the same move you've been running since Mom died. Make Nadia the one with the question mark, so everything flows to you. She opened her mouth. I didn't let her have it. You told me to update my paperwork, I said. You told me Grandma had you help her sort her binder. You've never used the word paperwork to me in your life. You slipped. And I know what a slip is worth, because I spend 40 hours a week around people who slip. I picked up my phone and put it back in my bag. You've spent 6 months assuming I wasn't paying attention. I want you to think very carefully about how safe an assumption that was. She didn't cry after that. The tears just dried up mid-performance, the way a faucet stops because she finally understood the audience wasn't buying the show. What do you want? She said. Flat, the real Renee at last. I want you to remember, I said, standing, leaving cash on the table for both of us because I am and always have been the one who handles things, that I gave you this lunch, this warning, off the record. I looked down at her. Everything after this is on it. Renee did not take the warning. I hadn't expected her to. People who mistake your patience for weakness rarely revise the estimate on the first correction. Within days, she went into damage control, but she did it the way she does everything, loudly, and to the wrong audience. She started calling relatives. I heard about it because relatives called me, Aunt Belle first. Your sister rang me, Belle said in her dry way, to tell me you've become paranoid and you're building a case against her like some kind of lawyer, and that we should all be worried for the baby. A pause. I told her I'd been at that birthday dinner. I told her I'd heard the joke 6 or 7 times myself, and I told her the only person I was worried about was the one who'd made it. Belle exhaled. She hung up on me, dear. So now Renee was documenting herself again, calling witnesses, on the record, to repeat the very smear I'd caught her constructing. She could not help it. It's who she is. She thought she was rallying the family. She was signing statement after statement. Meanwhile, I did the quiet work. Grandma Esther had meant it about the binder. The following Saturday, I sat at her kitchen table with the cassette playing softly in the background, Grandma's young voice, "Hush, little baby," the creak of that 40-year-old chair, and I went through her documents the way I'd go through any client's. Carefully, professionally, and there it was. Renee had been busy. There was a draft not executed, thank God, but drafted, in Renee's handwriting on a sticky note attached to it, suggesting Grandma simplify her estate by naming Renee sole executor and shifting the bulk to her, since Nadia's situation is uncertain. The joke, in ink, doing exactly the work it had always been designed to do. And beneath it, a second note worse, a suggestion that Grandma hold something back for Theo just in case things aren't what they seem. My son, reduced to a question mark in writing in a sticky note stuck to my grandmother's will. Grandma watched me read it. Renee wrote those, she said. For my own good, she said. Her voice trembled, but not with confusion, with anger. I let her put them there because I was tired and she was insistent, but I kept them. I don't throw things away, Nadia. Neither does your grandmother. The faintest smile. You come by it honestly. I photographed everything. I dated everything. I did not raise my voice once. By the time the cassette clicked to its end, I had it all: the 9 written jokes, the vent, Marissa's account, Belle's account, the smear campaign Renee was conducting in real time, and now the estate notes in Renee's own hand tying the joke directly to money. The joke had never been a joke. It was a motive with a punchline attached, and Renee had helpfully documented every step of it. There was one thing left to do, and it wasn't a lawsuit, though I could have built one. It was something older and, I think, harder. I called Grandma. I'd like to have everyone over, I said. Not a party, just family. I'd like us all in one room. For what, dear? I looked across the kitchen at Theo, asleep in his carrier, and at Daniel beside him, and I thought about the tape, and about how some things get recorded whether you mean them to or not. So it can be said out loud, I said, in front of everyone, just once. The whole point. I didn't ambush her. I want that on the record too. I called it a family dinner, and it was one, in the sense that Grandma cooked and there was a roast and the wallpaper was still peeling in the same corner. But everyone who mattered was there by design. Grandma Esther at the head of the table, Aunt Belle to her right, Marissa pale and fidgeting, cousins and an uncle filling the rest, Daniel beside me with Theo drowsing in the carrier at our feet. And Renee, who arrived last, radiant, in a dress chosen for a triumph she believed was coming, because I had let her believe through 2 weeks of careful silence that I had backed down, that the responsible one had, as always, decided to handle it quietly and let it go. She swept in expecting the natural order restored. She got a room that had already heard the tape. We ate. It was almost unbearable, the ordinariness of it, the passing of the beans. And then, when the plates were cleared and Grandma poured her 1 glass of sherry, amber, glowing, the exact cue Renee had taught Marissa to wait for, I set down my napkin. "Renee," I said, gently, "you've been telling everyone Theo isn't Daniel's, for 6 months. At every dinner, it's your best bit." I smiled. "I thought tonight we could finally hear the whole thing, out loud, the way you meant it." She laughed, reflexive, reaching for the room. "Oh, Nadia, it's a joke." "It's 9 jokes," I said, and I laid my phone on the table, screen up, the group chat glowing. "Time-stamped, in your handwriting when text has no tone to hide behind." I slid a second sheet beside it, a photograph. "And this is a note, your handwriting, stuck to Grandma's will, since Nadia's situation is uncertain. And this one." I laid down the third. "Hold something back for Theo, just in case things aren't what they seem." I looked up at her. "You wrote that about a baby, my baby." "To move money." The room had gone very quiet. Grandma's hand was steady around her sherry, but her eyes were on Renee, and there was no softness in them now. No sherry tenderness for Renee to work. She files it, she had. "The joke was never a joke," I said, and my voice didn't rise. "I have learned that the strongest thing you can do in a room is to stay low and let everyone lean in. You told Marissa, through the vent in the spare room, exactly what it was for. She doesn't laugh, she files it. That's the whole point. Marissa's here. She heard it. Ask her." Every face turned to Marissa. Marissa, who has a conscience, a wobbly one, looked at the table and then at Renee and then, quietly, at me. "She said that," Marissa whispered. "I told her it was mean. I'm Nadia, I'm sorry. I should have said something months ago." Renee tried the tears then. She'd tried them at the cafe and they'd failed, but a cornered performer returns to her repertoire. "I can't believe you'd do this to me. In front of everyone, you've turned them all against me. This is exactly what I—" "Stop." It was Grandma, not loud, but it stopped everything. She set the sherry down untouched. "Renee, you sat in my kitchen and put those notes on my will and you told me it was for my own good." Her old voice shook and held. "I am 82 years old. I have buried a daughter. Do not sit at that child's table and cry because someone finally opened a window." And that was the moment. Not a scream, not a slap. An 82-year-old woman refusing, at last, to be managed. I watched the whole thing collapse in Renee's face. The strategy, the narrative, the 6 patient months of poison, because the one person the joke had been aimed at had just declined to file it against me. She looked around the table for a single ally and found none. Belle, arms folded. Marissa, wet-eyed. Daniel, who does not know how to be cruel, looking at her with something worse than anger, which is pity. The uncle studying his hands. And Grandma, upright and terrible and finally, fully awake. Renee stood so fast her chair scraped. "You're all," she started, and then stopped, because there was nothing to accuse us of. We had simply listened. She grabbed her coat and she left, and the door didn't slam so much as click, the smallest sound, the sound of a woman walking out of a room that no longer believed her. At my feet, Theo woke and made a syllable of his unmade language. Daniel reached down and lifted him, and my son looked exactly, achingly, like his father, which everyone in that room could plainly see and always could. Renee did not go to jail. I want to be honest about how these things actually end, because real life rarely hands you handcuffs. It hands you something slower and, I've come to think, heavier. What happened to my sister was quiet, and it was total. The estate was the first thing. Grandma Esther, awake now and not to be put back to sleep, asked me, the granddaughter who knows about all that legal business, to help her redo it properly, with a real attorney, cleanly, unambiguously. Renee's notes came off the will and into a folder I keep, because I don't throw things away. Grandma named me executor, split the estate evenly between her granddaughters as she'd always intended before the Whisper campaign, and added one line of her own, which she dictated and I will remember until I die. And a portion held in trust for my great-grandson Theo, who is loved, and who is exactly who he is. She looked at me when she said it. Renee had tried to use my son as a question mark. Grandma turned him into an answer. The social cost was the second thing, and it was the one Renee felt most. There was no scandal, no dramatic banishment. There was just a family that had heard the tape. Belle stopped calling her. Marissa pulled away, carrying her own guilt. The group chat, Renee's beloved audience, the stage she'd built, went silent for her. People simply stopped laughing at the bit, and a performer without laughter is just a person saying cruel things alone. She was still invited to the dinners. She rarely comes. When she does, no one waits for the sherry anymore, and she knows why. And the third thing was the thing I hadn't dared hope for, what came back. Grandma and I are closer now than we've been since my mother died, the cooling reversed, the source removed. Daniel stopped tightening his jaw at family functions. And Theo, who understands none of it, will grow up hearing his great-grandmother's 40-year-old voice singing Hush Little Baby off-key on a cassette because I finally digitized it so it can't wear out, so it will outlast all of us. As for Renee and me, I won't lie and call it reconciliation. It isn't tearful. It isn't a movie. She sent one message months later, I'm sorry. I don't really know how to be, but I am. I wrote back, I believe you don't know how. That's where we are. Not healed. Not enemies. Two sisters who buried a mother young and turned out to have learned opposite lessons from the grief. She learned to perform for survival, and I learned to keep records. Maybe someday it will be more. I keep the door unlocked. I do not stand in it waiting. I think often about that cassette and about the thing I understood in the car that night. Some things get recorded whether you mean them to or not, and they don't care what you meant. Renee meant a joke. What she actually recorded, in 9 time-stamped messages and 2 notes in her own hand and 1 strategy hissed through a vent, was the truth about herself, patient, documented, undeniable. She built the case. I only pressed play. She thought I wasn't paying attention. I am always paying attention. It's the only inheritance my mother left me, and it turned out to be the one that mattered.